ass of everybody.
Although the amoeba moves slowly, walking backwards is never completely safe.
Watch yourself.
Watch it.
Watch it.
Whoa. Okay, we're out of here.
Street signs and other obstacles make for frequent trouble. And with so many people and cameras involved, tempers can flare.
You were pushing us.
I'm getting pushed, Tony.
No, Scott. Well, I'm sorry. Don't do it again.
Despite the appearance of chaos, the amoeba caused few problems. And with the courthouse closed to cameras, the bullpen more or less off limits to attorneys, these daily trips became important, accepted components of coverage. However, the actual soundbite-based information gleaned from these daily excursions was minimal. And for reporters like Terry Watkins, who had covered the story from the beginning, this meant attorneys would have to try the case in the courtroom and not in the media.
We are, to a very minor degree, dealing with the spin game. We dealt with the spin game to a very large degree going into this trial. Spinning is harder if a lawyer is not doing the spinning. Hopefully a reporter sits objectively in the courtroom, listens to what is happening, and then tries to portray it. It is not shaded by the need for a soundbite in it, which can be the spin.
An important daily routine for reporters involved victims who were willing to talk. Marcia Kite, who lost her daughter in the blast, and several others earned a dubious sort of fame because of the media's need for reaction to testimony.
That is the only reason. You know, there's only been about, in my mind, about 8 victims that have really talked to the media. Anytime you switch on CNN, NBC, ABC, local affiliates in Denver, Tulsa, Oklahoma City, you see Marcia Kite. And you think, gosh, she's the only one that lost anyone. It's a weird perspective from that standpoint.
They need to know what happened and what can happen if somebody builds a bomb.
CNN, I gotta do CNN.
Marcia Kite and others like Roy Sells became unofficial spokespeople for the thousands who suffered personal losses in the bombings. But the willingness to talk in Denver was a big change from 1995 when the media pressure was too much to handle.
I didn't know where my daughter was. I didn't feel like doing an interview at the time. And that went on for 5 days for me. At one point, when someone approached me with a camera, I ran out of the church and was pulled to the ground by my husband and son. I felt it very intrusive. And at that point, I hated the media.
I think that in a very time-sensitive business with deadlines coming up with scary rapidity sometimes, that we sometimes lose sight of the humanness of the people we're covering.
In Denver, the Media Consortium, victim advocates, and law enforcement established ground rules for victim treatment. A nearby church served as a media-free safe haven, and a sidewalk to the courthouse was protected as well. Victims were also coached on handling the media.
I think that originally in Oklahoma City, some victims had some very, very bad experiences. It was overwhelming at a time where they were already overwhelmed. So they came here and transferred that anxiety to here. This was a much more organized setting, and I think it was such a sense of relief that they knew that there were restricted areas, that the press could not get into those areas, that there was options about having interviews, that they weren't going to be jumped on.
I don't know of very much harassment that most media people in this event were so emotionally moved themselves that they were tender enough with most of us that we didn't experience a whole lot of harassment.
Before, maybe I really did feel like that they was insensitive, but experiencing it firsthand made me realize that they're not really insensitive because they do feel for the families. They feel a very emotional state themselves. So it's changed a lot the way I feel about the media.
I felt very used at first, and it was probably a year later I decided I'm going to use the media too, because I have a message that I want to deliver. And then once I was ready to do that, it became more acceptable because there are certain things that I want to be said and made known. and I used them as a tool as they had used me for their story.
I think the media generally takes on an approach of they're in control and you're a victim to their needs for a story. And so the victims in this experience here in Denver, I think, truly felt in control of their experience with the media.
Even though this can get frustrating at times, we're running around sticking a camera in your face.
Even though they controlled access, victims were in demand, as were attorneys who were willing to comment on daily activities in the courtroom.
I'm a lawyer, Denver criminal defense lawyer, a columnist for the Rocky Mountain News, and king of the sound bites, apparently. I've actually done stuff for about 30, 35 outlets, from BBC to Westwood One and all the alphabeticals in between.
Robinson not only talked to anyone who wanted his opinion, he also wrote a daily column analyzing events.
My role has been an expert on the scene, a trial lawyer who's been in front of Judge Mage, who has been in high-profile cases as a lawyer, and who is both writing and talking about the case at great length. Because there is no television coverage, on-the-scene legal analysts are in incredible demand, which makes me very glad that I haven't been charging anything for this, because the guilt would be overwhelming.
Virtually every reporter covering the trial was in the market for legal analysis at one time or another. And like Robinson, most analysts were shared. The courtroom limitations also led to sharing of resources like courtroom drawings. The lack of a camera in the courtroom rejuvenating the careers of courtroom artists.
That was sort of out of business for a few years until O.J. Simpson, a good verdict with O.J., which a lot of judges took a second look at it and said, well, maybe that's not such a good idea.
The lack of a TV in the courtroom did change coverage, but there were alternatives to getting information quickly. The internet was achieving new maturity as a resource for information, including court transcripts and evidence. The internet was also providing scores of websites devoted strictly to bombing-related stories.
I think this was, in many ways, the trial by fire for online media. And again, it's because there was no TV coverage, was limited. Because the moving picture stuff, because court TV couldn't have it 24 hours a day, every day, people turned to the web. And I think that was a real breakthrough for online media. I think anybody who had a computer modem and was even halfway familiar with online services or the internet knew that they could go at any time on the internet and find 100 sites, you know, that have to do with this trial.
Despite the new media filling in some of the gaps, interest in the case dropped off during routine daily testimony. The number of journalists on site also fell. Those who stayed could sometimes take it easy, but the weather kept crews in the bullpen wishing for a roof.
I have been in Denver and survived 4 seasons all before noon because, geez Louise, we've been through snow, we've been through hail, we've been through rain, we've been through tornadoes. We've been through, I think frogs and locusts are next.
The weather was unpredictable, but the pace of the trial was not. It moved forward without hesitation.
The judge really has kept a tight rein on a lot of things and used his spurs quite a bit, as a matter of fact, to keep the trial moving.
The speed of the trial meant that by the end of May, a verdict was close, and demand for coverage once again began to grow. Day-to-day national interest in the story could be gauged by a reporter's average workday. For example, during high points of the case, ABC affiliate correspondent Steve Saunders would begin work as early as 2 in the morning, writing and then editing a review of the previous day's events and a preview of what was to come. Saunders would then provide custom live reports for dozens of affiliate stations starting at 3:30 in the morning.
The trial of Timothy McVeigh has moved along at lightning speed.
I think actually it was better TV than a lot of people had thought in terms of the interest. I know since I worked with the affiliates, there was that kind of prediction ahead of time, how much interest would this trial have? And I think it actually surpassed what many people had expected, just in terms of the level of requests we got to do, for instance, live shots. That picked up as the trial went along. So even though there was no camera in there, it actually, I guess, made some pretty interesting television.
For newspaper